Hey there, Squirrel Army. How's it going for today? We're discussing how good or bad Grave Titan actually is. At least in my opinion. If you're enjoying the content here, you can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing and turning on the notifications. It keeps the squirrels from eating your nuts. Alrighty. So, we're discussing the classic Grave Titan. If you don't know about this classic old school card, because it has been around for quite a while, it's a 6 mana, 4 and double black, 6/6 giant with Death Touch. When he enters the battlefield or attacks, you make 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. So, this is a, card that goes in a lot of decks, and a lot of people think that it goes in a lot of decks, because it is played a fair bit in EDH. In fact, it's in 29,900 plus decks, which is 4% of the 39,400 odd decks that it could go in. But hey, that is what it is. It's still a fairly high-leveled played card for the most part. I saw this card a lot in the Nitpicking Nerds hate list and whatnot. And yes, there are things, quote-unquote, that you could be doing that are, quote-unquote, better than it. But hey, you know what? Not everyone is playing the same level of Magic. Not everyone is just playing this ultimate top-tier level of Magic. I know there's some combos that you can kind of do with it, but there are definitely other combos that you can do, or the same sort of combos that you can do with other cards. And I think that this is a fairly decent card. I run it in a couple of decks. It has to be a fairly specific deck for me to want to run it, i.e. a tokens deck, perhaps, or Ishin. Ishin was a great include with this, because, well, just getting 4 zombies when it attacks is pretty darn good. And those zombies can help you block or whatever. There's a lot of little things that they can do. And again, I guess that's the metagame, or part of the metagame that I'm at and a lot of people are at. But that's the small issue that I guess I do have with this card, is its price, because it's sort of outpriced for the level of metagame that it's sort of meant for, which is people who are playing, these big Timmy-style cards and whatnot, and where combat damage and whatnot and all of this sort of stuff, and you're blocking and all of this sort of stuff kind of matters. And I get that's not where everyone's at and whatnot, and there's more efficient ways to win, but that's the level that I'm usually playing at. And if you're playing at a pre-con level, or slightly upgraded pre-con, or even just maybe just above that, it's still a really fine card. So, yes, certainly it won't make it into the upper echelons of cards and whatnot, and again, you could do better things if you really wanted to combo with a card that, just makes two bodies to sack with all these other things and whatnot. There's more efficient ways to do it. But hey, it's also good for other things because of, its other stats. And I get that, again, some people don't really care about its stats because it's the effects that matter to some people. But again, the stats on this aren't terrible, and its ability as far as Death Touch isn't terrible. And the thing with this card is, even saying that the effect as you cast it or as you play it, whatever, or as it enters, whatever, isn't that amazing? 6 mana for 2/2/2s and a 6/6 Death Toucher. that isn't too amazing, obviously. There are some things that you could figure out with this, like Panharmonicon, Yurok, etc. Actually, it'd probably be pretty good in Yurok or whatnot, in those sort of flickering style decks and whatnot. It wouldn't be the most amazing either, but again, it wouldn't be terrible. So again, like, that's where I like it, is because it does something immediately. And yes, again, as I was sort of saying, it isn't super amazing to get, a 6/6 for 6. That's just, decent. And then 6/6 Death Touch, that's just okay. Or, whatever. And then, getting 2 extra 2/2s isn't that amazing. But again, later, the next turn, after you can do something, or if you have haste, whatever, it starts doing stuff. It starts putting in the work. So I like that it can do something immediately. I like that it can do something for, the rest of the game that it sticks around in. If you find some way to give this guy vigilance, it's really, 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 really good. Because it's like, oh, I attack, I make zombies, I have a big 6/6 Death Toucher that no one really wants to attack into, and have all these chump blocking 2/2s, so that's really good. But again, it's not as good as like, oh, turn 2, turn 3, I win, whatever. Certainly, it's not that powerful. It's not meant to be played in those power levels where people are doing that sort of thing. It's meant to be played in the power levels where, again, people are playing, they're mostly homebrews. They're not building off of a, CDH or high-powered list. This isn't a card for a combo deck because, again, you could do so much more with so many other cards and more efficient cards and whatnot. This is a card for, decks that are playing that, lower-ish tier of commander, where you can get some value out of it immediately, which is really good. And then you can get some value out of it if it sticks around, which is really good. So all of those things are really good. But yes, it doesn't go in a zombie deck for some people because it's not a zombie, and all your zombie things don't care about it being a zombie, but it does make zombies. So if you can somehow make it a zombie, which isn't too hard, there's some effects that make things zombies, and whatnot, then you are off to the races with this thing, getting buffed by all the other things that buff your zombies and whatnot, or skeletons or whatever it is. But yeah, certainly, as I say, I like to assess cards evenly, so I'll try as much as I can now to, because I've sort of gone through some of the positives and some of the, good things about this card. And as I sort of said, one of the downsides of this card is its price. Like, it's not as overpriced as what it was a few years ago or whatever it was, or a little while back, but it still is a fairly high price, about $10, $11, $12 Australian, and I think it should be a couple of bucks maybe, but that's, kind of where I think it should be at. It should certainly be roughly half the price, or even maybe less than that. Maybe a quarter of the price would be really good. But hey, as I say, some cards need to have some amount of value. So yeah, that's okay if it's a couple of bucks or whatever. But certainly it being, up there in terms of, well, not up there as far as some cards, but certainly up there in some terms of, like, this is meant to, it seems like it's meant to be a card for players who are more on a budget, and not like you can't afford it, but certainly it's one of the cards that you probably would consider to be getting last, or nearly last, because it's still fairly expensive, and there's just other cards that are probably more better for you to be picking up at this price point, like dual lands and whatnot. And yes, again, I will say that even saying that I play in that metagame where, combat damage, etc. is still one of the bigger things, and, no one really gets going until turn 6 or 7 or whatnot, really. And again, people say this is a 6-drop, so it comes out on turn 6. Well, no, it doesn't a lot of the time. So I guess I'm sort of defending this, but again, whatever, I'm trying to point out as many points as I can, as quickly as I can. But anyway, yes, it doesn't always come out on turn 6. Sometimes it comes out on turn 4 or 5. You know, I haven't seen it many times come out on turn 3, but I know it can happen. Or even earlier. So again, it's not like it's always played on turn 6 and whatnot. And yes, sure, again, people are running lots more removal nowadays than what they used to run, and a lot more exile-based removal, which, hey, exile-based removal is good removal. It is the best removal. But again, hey, you know, you can only do what you can do. You can only control the factors that you can control. But the main argument, I guess, that it comes back to with this whole thing is that, quote-unquote, it doesn't do enough for the cost. And sure, you could find other things. It does depend on what colours you're in, because I always find that people say, well, I'm just in 5-colour good stuff or whatever. And that becomes like, well, what if you're just mono black, or what if you're just 2 colours or whatever, you know, like, it suddenly becomes like, well, I have a whole lot less options once I'm down to 1 or 2 colours or whatever, and whatnot. So it's a lot more different when you're just talking about mono black, perhaps, or whatever. And even so, yes, there are a lot of options that are out there, but it also does depend what you're doing, because, hey, if you care about the tokens, then perhaps this is actually a relevant-ish card for you if you could care about ETBs, attack triggers, and hey, a lot of the decks that are in this power level bandwidth that care about those sorts of things, whatnot, those are those sorts of decks that actually care about these sorts of abilities that are in that more slower bandwidth of decks that would actually probably look at using a card like this. So, yeah, but again, like, yes, 100%, it isn't the greatest card ever. No. You know, like, again, and again, there is a huge amount of power creep that's been happening in the last few years. Yes, sure, we get cards here and there in the new sets that are just kind of bad duds and whatnot, but again, for the most part, overall, a lot of Magic cards nowadays are better than what they were years ago, and the design is a lot better in terms of where we're at nowadays than what it was before. But you could still, I could still not find very many cards that would actually top this card in terms of what it specifically does for certain specific strategies and synergies. Again, you could say that the Red Titan, Inferno Titan, is a lot better because, hey, it just deals damage and you don't need to rely on, you know, waiting to attack with those 2/2s this turn or whatnot, because you can't attack with them this turn or whatnot, and it's more damage and whatnot overall. So you could argue that and whatnot. I get that. But again, I'm not saying that that's a bad card either. I'm just saying that it does depend on what you're actually doing, and that's a different color again. So it's one of those things. If you actually care about burn damage and whatnot, or if you just care about killing your opponents as quickly as possible, then that might be a better card. Yes, sure. And certainly the White Titan, Sun Titan, is probably the best Titan, besides the Green Titan, Prime Time. But hey, that one's banned, so we can't play with that one. Obviously, the blue one's basically the worst one, and whatnot. But still, even that, it's not the worst card in the world ever. It is not that amazing, definitely not. But still, hey, there are other cards that are definitely worse, and you could find a whole lot of, 6 mana, 6/6 or even less stats for, in older sets of Magic. So again, there are cards that are worse than this that people do play and whatnot. And again, maybe that's for lol, funny, haha themes or whatnot, and things like this or whatnot, whatever it is, or I'm just playing a generic dot deck or whatever it is, or vanilla's dot deck, whatever you want to call it. But again, hey, that is what it is. If that's what you're doing, that's what you're doing. But hey, I would rather get something that actually has, somewhat decent stats on its own and actually does something on its own and actually helps out whatever strategy that I'm trying to enact. And if this card actually is decent for that strategy, then hey, I'll pick one up because hey, I can spend, 12, 15 bucks or whatever on this card. That's okay to me because I'm a fairly invested Magic player. But again, somebody else who's like, oh, well, I only have $5 or whatever to spend on my deck this week or this month or whatever it is, and things like that. But again, it does depend where you're at. You might say, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put $5 away instead. And then next week I'm going to put another $5 away. And then I'm going to, come back in 3 weeks' time and, hey, I get that Grave Titan that I've wanted for a little while. It's one of those things about budgeting and finally getting the cards that you actually want or trading in some of the cards that you don't want. That's why I don't keep a lot of cards, only the really, really cards that I really know I will play with or will really, really want, because it's like, well, why would I keep these cards if I need other cards and they're worth something? I might as well trade them in and get something out of them until perhaps I need them again. Who knows? But that's the thing. That is what it is. But hey, anyway, guys, I think I've discussed this long enough here. I wanted to try to point out some positives and negatives of this card, and certainly it's not all upside and whatnot. It fits in some very specific-ish decks, and that's about it. Again, I'm not going to overhype or underhype this card at all. I'm just saying that, hey, when you say it doesn't belong anywhere or it doesn't synergize with anything, well, yes, it does, and it does depend what you want to do. Hey, I'm the type of person that doesn't like certain things and doesn't want to do certain things, and this is just the type of card that I like and would actually be like, okay, cool, that's something that I would like and would want to do something with, plus it works with a few other cards that I'm running in my deck. But hey, whatever. You guys can let me know what you guys think about this card, what my thoughts on it were. Write them all down there in the comments below. I'll be sure to try to respond to all your comments. But hey, if I don't see you down there in those comments, I'll see you in the next one.